Hi, welcome back to Bebop Review. My name is Andy Shaw. I just want to talk today about this video by Adam Neely. I got this recommended by YouTube because I've watched quite a few of Neely's videos. In fact, I remember when he called himself Havoc 5. That was quite a long time ago. When I first saw this video, I thought, wow, American rhythms are superior. I mean, it's such a great title, isn't it? It's got to be about bebop, I was thinking to myself. I was expecting Neely to wax lyrically on the superiority of Charlie Parker's rhythmic playing and how it influenced players and all instruments, on the development of drumming from the early days of Kenny Clarke, or as he became known, Liaquat Ali Salam. So I pressed the start button with great anticipation. 5 seconds of adverts. No!
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The American system of naming rhythms is unequivocally superior to all of the others. Things like crotchets, minims and quavers are demonstrably inferior to the American system that uses quarter notes, half notes and eighth notes. Bloody hell, what a disappointment! He gets me all worked up expecting a video on bebop rhythm. What does he give us? The different names used by the British and Americans for units of rhythm. To the average player that would equal 5 different names at most. Look at this picture of my OU book and you can see that these names clearly. A British semibreve becomes whole note to Americans, a minimum half note, crotchet quarter note and so on. I mean, we are talking about the same rhythms, just different names, and it's not like there are thousands of different names. Adam Neely goes on for 10 minutes dividing up pizzas to explain the superiority of the American naming system without actually explaining why the British haven't adopted the American system. I mean, we can all add up over here and can see the logic of those names. In fact, as I've shown you from the page in my OU book, the British do learn the American note names in conjunction with their own. Well, I did anyway. Okay, Adam Neely, he's had his bit of fun, so it's now time for a British writer reply.
Wait a minute, are you knocking this country? Are you saying something against America?
Not at all. I actually agree with Adam insofar as the rhythmic names he's given are better and would make music much more accessible to young players.
You're playing all the wrong notes.
I'm playing all the right notes, but not necessarily in the right order. I'll give you that. I'll give you that, sunshine.
So why don't the British adopt those American rhythm names? I think the first thing to note is that the British are not too keen on naming things by numbers compared to, say, the Germans. If you look at some famous aircraft from the Second World War, you can see that the British prefer names to numbers. Strange thing is, the Americans seem to like names as well. These Mustang fighters even have personalised names scrolled on them. So to say the Americans prefer numbers just doesn't cut it. Another explanation could be that the British are steeped in tradition, some of it a bit crazy. Take the Queen's birthday for instance, where everyone watches the household guard on Horse Guard Parade. The thing is, that is not her real birthday, but the official one. How about the state opening of Parliament? We have a crazy figure called Blackrod, who, representing the Queen, has the House of Commons door slammed in his face every year. He then has to bang 3 times before he's let in, and after commanding the MPs to leave and join the Queen in the House of Lords, he gets a humorous quip from MP Dennis Skinner on the Queen's love of horse racing.
This honourable House to attend Her Majesty immediately in the House of Peers.
Yeah, get your skates on. First race is 2:30.
I think that tradition is an important element in the British resistance to adopting any American terminology in music. I keep reading things like, in view of the large amount of musical literature already in existence, changes, however satisfying to a strict logical sense, should not be introduced without really pressing reason. You have to realise that American music terminology is quite recent in the history of music. If you look at this page from James Lyon's Urania, the first publicised music book by an American, you can see that British terminology rules. Pay particular attention to this phrase. In learning the 8 notes, get the assistance of some person well acquainted with the tones and semitones. The change in the meaning of the word tone splits modern America not only from the British but from their past. So when did all this happen? When was it that America split with the British? It seems to date from a group calling itself the Committee on Terminology Reform, which sat from 1906 onwards. The Americans, with poor communication skills, did not invite the British to these meetings. This is unfortunate, and many divergences arose between the two. First of all, whereas all British terminology is based on the Royal School of Music's grading system and is uniform throughout the UK, Oxford University made extensive inquiry into American cities in 1938 and found that some musical terminology was surprisingly local in currency, being apparently in common use in one part of the country and almost unknown in another part. The Americans also sometimes ignore their own terminology and continue to use British. There are dozens of divergences, but the main differences I'll list here. The worst confusion arises from the words note and tone. The American definition of note is a written sign representing pitch and duration. So to an American pianist, for instance, the sign on the paper in front of him is a note, and that is all. The sound that the note makes when the pianist strikes that key is called tone. So tone can have duration and pitch to an American. To the British, however, both the sign in front of him and the sound which ensures when he presses that note on the keyboard is called a note. Tone is an intervallic distance between notes, i.e. tone, semitone, etc. The suggestion that note should be reserved for the sign and tone used for the sound seems to have been first made by the Englishman John Kirwan, but has never been adopted in Britain for the reason that the word tone has already too many accepted meanings: tone, colour, Gregorian tone, etc. The American names are from the German usage die note for written or printed note and der Ton for the sounded one. American phrases like 3 tones lower or scale of 5 tones has a completely different meaning to the British. The Americans may call this a scale of 5 tones, but the British never would. To them, this would be called a scale of 5 notes. To the British, a scale of 5 tones would look like this, with a whole tone between each note. The Americans' contention as regards note is that to use it for sound is wrong because it names a notational element. The British would counter this and say it defies more than 5 centuries of English usage, and to accuse writers like Chaucer, Shakespeare, Milton, Tennyson, and also Morley, Simpson, Purcell and other theorists of ignorance of their own language, and further to accuse all French and Italian writers of a similar ignorance, as well as early American writers. I don't think the British are ever going to change their stand on note or tone. American terminology states that the rhythmic period, formerly known as bar in English, be substituted for the word measure. The word bar is left for the sign, as in bar line. This is another John Kirwan suggestion that was rejected by the British on the grounds that it was unnecessary. The interesting thing about measure is that it is used quite frequently in Britain and is gaining ground. To be fair, calling the rhythmic period measure is much more logical than bar, don't you think? The Americans, however, seem to use the Old English term bar for the rhythmic period far more than their own word measure. Told you they like names. Adam Neely, the champion of American terminology, himself uses the word bar for the rhythmic period.
A 4-bar repeat.
So just what does he think he's doing?
That certainly is strange.
Look at this. What is he doing?
What's he doing?
He's going the other way!
What? This could only happen in America.
The ancient names of the notes and rests, semibreve, minim, etc., have, again from German influence, been generally abandoned in America for the more descriptive words whole note, half note, etc. This is the main subject of Adam Neely's video, and as I've already stated, I quite agree that the American system should supersede the British. However, having slagging off the mensural system, Neely goes on to praise it in another form.
What?
Yes, it's true. He then praises the French notational system, which, like the British, is based on the very same system.
It cannot be. It just cannot be.
And what reason does he give? He likes the French names more than the British names. It doesn't matter that the French system is just as silly as the British. He just likes the names.
What's his angle, Dad? Yeah, I was wondering about that too. There's something very funny going on here.
Look, I was all set up with my little group of British revolutionaries to go down to London and burn down the Royal School of Music unless we change to the American fractional system. And what happens? Our glorious leader changes his mind and starts to backtrack. You are illogical, my dear Adam. Alright, I'll stop this video here. You get things like cancel for natural, raise for sharp and lower, for flattened, etc. I honestly don't think there's any real need to go on because you can find the differences in a link I've put below on Nina Gilbert's page on American British Terminology, and she's updated it all the time. So I'd actually look at that yourself. I've just tried to explain things that she doesn't go into at all, you know, like the tone. That's really the main problem between the British and Americans and why the British are not going to accept American terminology. It's that thing about tone that seems to be the main stumbling block. As far as Adam Neely goes, I'd be a bit careful in accepting everything he says as gospel. He's another one of these YouTube gurus whose every word some people hang on to. You should be very sceptical when he uses Wikipedia, because that's a very unreliable source, and he uses it as factual information. Wikipedia couldn't even get the birthday of their own founder correct. If you look at this comment from somebody called Acapella Sax, he states that I have a sentimentality because I always find something wrong with books I've read. Okay, just look at this and see what you think. Look at this page from the New Grove Dictionary of Jazz, Volume 1. It says here many early bop themes, right, such as Ornithology, which was composed by Parker and Little Benny Harris, that's correct. Anthropology, which was composed by Parker and Gillespie, that's correct. Grooving Eye, composed by Gillespie, correct. Donna Lee, composed by Miles Davis, that's correct. And Hot House, composed by Gillespie. Now that's wrong. Hot House was not composed by Gillespie. It was composed by Tad Dameron. Now the thing is, I've actually spotted that mistake in the New Grove Dictionary of Jazz, which is a quite expensive set. And that a cappella sax says I've got a sad mentality for doing that. What he's saying is I've got a sad mentality for having knowledge, for actually knowing something. What I'm actually saying is the same thing about Adam Neely. Really, you just want to be looking at what he's saying and see if... In fact, I'll give an example from that actual video that I've just been looking at. Right, Adam Neely actually states in there that he actually says, as music progresses, as the centuries progress, and as music progresses.
Well, as the centuries progressed and music progressed...
Well, the thing is, music doesn't really progress, does it? It just changes. It's not like science. I mean, you can look at the Wright brothers first playing, and that's pretty primitive, isn't it, compared to Concorde, you know, something like Concorde. But the thing is that the creative process that the Wright brothers used to create that first playing is something that hasn't changed at all. The brilliance of the Wright brothers in actually putting it all together in the mind and creating that first aircraft is in a way greater than what the engineers who built Concorde did, because they weren't creating the first flight like the Wright brothers. So the creative process of the Wright brothers, or the creative process of human beings, hasn't changed over the years. And art is a creative form. It's not mathematics or science which actually progresses. I mean, you can look at the Wright brothers playing and you can say, oh, that is definitely primitive and we've advanced further. But the creative process that went on inside the Wright brothers' head, the kind of like the artistic part of it, you know, even though it's engineering, doesn't change in human beings. And it's so true in music that music doesn't progress and get better. It just changes. You can't say that modern composers are better than Beethoven or have progressed more than Mozart and Beethoven. What you can say is that the music's changed. That's how I see it anyway. But you might see it like Adam Neely. Adam Neely goes to gigs. I've seen his videos. He goes to gigs and he has computers and all sorts of stuff. And he might think that that's music progression because he's got computers now and all that kind of stuff. But I don't see it like that. So it's how we see. It's like we all interpret things. But I would actually really advise you, and I've said this a lot to my subscribers, and I just want to keep on saying it to them. Don't believe anything that anybody says. I know it sounds really nasty to say that. I mean, you've got to go through life, you've got to trust people and things like that. But if you accept everything everybody says as gospel, you're not going to really learn as much. You know, you're going to be... How can I explain it? Because I'm just talking here. If you accept everything as gospel, you're missing out. That's the word. You're missing out on other things that are out there. Because if you criticise somebody, right, or you look into it and make sure that it's speaking truth, you'll find things that you might think, "Oh, I'm glad I criticised him now because I found something new." That's how I see it, anyway. Adam Neely's videos are really good in the fact that he puts on a lot of videos that he talks a lot about. I mean, his best videos, I think, are when he's talking about being a professional musician. Obviously, that's something I don't know because I've always been an amateur. But he talks about being a professional musician, goes to clubs, and this is what he has to do, and how he communicates with people and problems they've had. And writing music. There was an interesting one where he actually wrote music and he didn't put any repetitive signs in because he says that you only need one musician to make a mistake. And that is so true. You know, things like that. And I never even thought about that kind of stuff, actually altering a piece of music and getting rid of the signs to make it easier for people to read. So I'm actually learning off Adam Neely all the time as well. But what I'm saying is that I don't accept everything that Adam Neely says as complete gospel, especially when I see him quote from Wikipedia, because like I said, Wikipedia is not a reliable source of information. You're much better going to... I know I've just been criticising Grove Dictionary, but much better off going to places like the Grove Dictionary or specialised subject dictionaries where you can get more accurate information. Wikipedia is really not very good at all. Anyway, I've talked enough here, so I'll leave you to it, and it's up to you to decide whether you're going to start writing slaggy comments down on it like a lot of people like to do, or take what I've said to heart and actually think about it. Like I said, don't believe everything I've said either. I'm as bad as anybody else at making mistakes. Okay, I'll see you at next video then. Bye.